will read the press statement. There are more copies available. Let me, as I said, start by once more thanking everybody. We are most honored that you are here, and a very special welcome to one of our standing entrepreneurs and contributor to business unity, and as well as the leader of the president of the Black Business Council, Mr. Sandile Zungu. Thank you so much, as well as the vice president. Has everybody got a copy of the press statement? If anybody has not, just raise your hands. Can you give the lady here? I see some football people here. It's not. It's good. It's not about football, and I know that some want to ask football-related questions. We've got more exciting things to talk about. I'm going to ask the CEO of African Rainbow Energy and Power, Mr. Brian Damos, to read the, and then I'll make a few comments and we'll take questions. Okay.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome. I will read the press statement. The founder and chairman of African Rainbow Energy and Power, AREP, Dr. Patrice Motsepe, today held a media conference to discuss the allegations and suspicions of improper plans and strategies which implicates AREP and relate to Eskom and the alleged roles by the Minister of Energy, Mr. Jeff Radebe, and President Cyril Ramaphosa, who are both his brothers-in-law. AREP was formed in 2012, and one of its main objectives was to utilize modern technology and renewable energy technologies to provide affordable electricity in South Africa and on the African continent. In the context of South Africa's high unemployment rate, AREP's commitment to use technology to create new jobs and to participate and contribute to creating transitional plans and strategies to provide new skills for employees and in particular coal miners, so that no workers will lose their jobs because of new technology and renewable energy plants. AREP's holding company is the only African company that is a partner in the Breakthrough Energy Ventures, BEV, which was started in 2016 by Bill Gates after the 2015 Paris climate change talks, and includes several globally respected business leaders like Jeff Bezos, Richard Branson, Jack Ma, Mukesh Ambani, and others. The goal of BEV is to use technology and innovation to provide clean energy and that does not contribute to climate change. Brian Damos was appointed as CEO in 2014. After evaluating and pursuing various renewable energy projects, AREP and its partner, Jinko Solar, submitted an offer in April 2016 to SunEdison, an American company, to acquire the 6 photovoltaic projects which SunEdison was awarded by the Department of Energy in April/June 2015. AREP was not successful, as SunEdison decided to sell to Old Mutual. Old Mutual thereafter invited BE bidders to acquire 30 to 35% of the equity in each of the 6 SunEdison solar voltaic projects which Old Mutual had acquired. In October 2017, AREP was informed by Old Mutual that it was one of 3 BE partners who were selected to each purchase 15% equity in SunEdison solar voltaic projects. The other 2 BE partners who each acquired 15% are Pakwe Solar, Riatila Solar Power. 6 local community trusts also acquired equity. The value of AREP's agreement with Old Mutual was approximately 462 million rand, and AREP committed 139 million rand from its own resources. Approximately 398 megawatts of power will be produced by these 6 projects. In October 2016, AREP, through a private sector bidding process, acquired 30% equity in Inongwana biomass project from Fusion Energy. The other shareholders in this project are SAPI, KC Africa from Korea, a community trust and an employee trust. The value of AREP's equity in this project is 153.4 million rand. In November 2017, AREP submitted a bid to Mainstream Renewable Power, an Irish company, to acquire a 22.5% equity stake in each of Kangas, 140 megawatts, and Perdekral, 110 megawatts. These wind projects were awarded to Mainstream by the Department of Energy in April/June 2015. REP did not succeed in acquiring 22.5% equity that it bid for, as Mainstream made 11.25% equity available to REP in each of Kangas and Perdekral East. Another BE company, H1, also acquired 11.25% equity in each of Kangas and Perdekral East. The value of REP's equity in these wind projects is 188.3 million rand. The total value of REP's current renewable energy projects is approximately 800 million rand, or 3.9% of the total equity value of the Department of Energy's Round 4 Renewable Energy Independent Power Producer, or REIPP, program, which is 20.6 billion rand. The total BE equity value for all projects under the Department of Energy's REIPP Round 4 is 8.6 billion rand. And a REP's share is 800 million rand, which is less than 10%. REP did not participate in the Department of Energy's REIPP projects relating to the provision of electricity to Eskom under Rounds 1, 2, 3, and 3.5, whose total equity value is 47.2 billion rand. It is patently clear that every single one of the 9 REIPP projects that REP is currently participating in and has a minority shareholding were acquired from privately owned companies and not from the Department of Energy. Any transfer of equity or shares under the REIPP program has to be approved by the Department of Energy and is based on certain qualification and evaluation criteria for preferred bidders. These qualification criteria include 1, the structure of the project, 2, legal criteria, 3, land acquisition and land use criteria, 4, environmental criteria, 5, financial criteria, 6, technical criteria, 7, economic development criteria, and 8, value for money. The evaluation criteria include, firstly, price. The government usually prefers the lowest electricity price, and secondly, economic development, which includes inter alia, black economic empowerment, local content procurement, and job creation. At the recent meeting with the leaders of workers in South Africa, Dr. Patrice Motsepe said, and I quote, "I have over the years reiterated my support for the developmental role that Eskom has to play and to provide affordable electricity to all South Africans, and in particular to the poor, the unemployed, and marginalized. Eskom should always be run by a world-class management team with proper governance structures and zero tolerance of corruption. Technology partnerships, and in particular fourth industrial revolution technology partnerships with the private sector, should be utilized to ensure that Eskom is efficient, as well as cost-effective and globally competitive. I, however, have never supported the privatization of Eskom or the sale of any of its assets, entities, or assets. A REP or any company that I'm associated with will therefore not participate or be part of any sale or disposal of any entities or assets of Eskom." Close quote. Dr. Patrice Motsepe is also of the view that, and I open quotes, "having relatives in very high positions in government justifiably raises perceptions of favoritism or improper conduct, particularly in the context of the REIPP programs where there is a relationship with the Minister of Energy. When the Minister of Energy was appointed, I told Brian Damas that, open quotes, "we now have a major and serious perception problem. REP has to fundamentally strengthen its governance and ethical requirements and procedures." Close quote. "We have a duty in all our businesses to be transparent and accountable for all our businesses and commercial activities. REP has introduced additional governance and ethical rules that will and will engage with all stakeholders to discuss and seek advice as to what additional measures can be put in place in this regard. We have, over the past 25 to 30 years, built and invested in world-class companies that do business in many countries and are successful and globally competitive. We have done so based on proper governance and ethical behavior. That is the way in which we do business and are committed to continue doing so. I close quote.
All right, thank you very much. I mean, this is, we will be available, of course, we're going to open it up now and answer what any questions you may have, and we will be available to deal with privately as well. When I say privately, I mean when the press conferences ended, to deal with whatever questions you may have. Let me just raise two issues which are very, very important, and we'll open it up. You see, you've got to see where we come from. You've got to see where, and I'm talking about the businesses that I'm associated with. I think there's one journalist who's just entered. Can we give them, give them the press statements, and those who may need will do so. So I think it's very important. You should see where we come from, and it's appropriate to start with what Nelson Mandela said at a meeting. Is that, you see, Patrice, whether you like it or accept it, you and others have become protectors of the system. And what he meant is that we have at all times to behave in a manner that is not just complying with the law, but also which is in terms of governance, which is ethical, but what is critically important, also deal with perceptions. And that's why over the last 20 years, it has been important what we do as a family, because it's not what the facts are. It's not so much our compliance with the law. The law you've got to comply with whether you like it or not. And we've done so and will continue to do so in South Africa and elsewhere. It is, how are you perceived? You know, this wealthy family, this wealthy person, when you mention our names in the minds of ordinary South Africans, and be careful, we're not talking about your educated South Africans, and even not so much your middle class, because they can look at the facts and form an opinion, and we understand we are living in a time when it's elections and lots of issues are going to be said, but we're a democracy. And even if I didn't have these relatives in government, I have a fundamental duty and an obligation not just to be transparent, but also to be ethical and accountable. Critically, critically important. Now, the second issue is, you know, what Brian was saying, the president of BBC is here. When I was president of Black Business Council and we united black and white business, and I was the first president of BUSA, we could engage in public meetings with the head of state and say, but, you know, our children go to private schools and they say to us, but Daddy, the maths teacher is not black. The children are ignorant. The science teacher is not black. 95% of our teachers are not black. What does that say about the capacity of black teachers? Now, we've got world-class teachers, and that's why we can be proud that some of our private schools employ some of the best black science lecturers. But it's a perception issue. So we could engage with past presidents, Mandela and Mbeki and various others after, to say, but, you know, as a business constituency, it would be important in these key positions. The easy one, have a minister for small business because it's important. Another one, have a minister that's going to look at transformation, inclusivity, and then issues like which were raised. Have a minister of finance which, you know, also reflects the diversity of the communities. Now, I first heard, and it is correctly so, who our new minister was when I saw it on TV, and I said, oh, Risulewe, Safa Sapel. And I immediately phoned Brian and I said, Brian, we are in trouble. Because we have, over the last 20, 25 years, really built world-class business. Let me give you another bad example. Assuming that we're going to play in the African Champions Cup, and it's a final, the final is going to be played. One of the teams that always loses that I'm associated with has got these ambitions, but let's put that aside for a minute. So assuming they're playing the finals, African champions, and just before the game, the referee comes and say, hater, and it's a relative. And then when you go on the field, the linesman, hater, another relative. Hey. Now, I mean, everything we've achieved, everything, every single game we've won, ethically, morally, and have the best. I mean, quite legitimately, and we should not, we should recognize that, and be honest and say, this is an issue. It is an issue, and we've looked at everything, including one of the companies that are associated with us has got $100 million committed to it for renewables in Africa, because that's where the opportunities are. But one of the conditions that we discussed is it will not get involved in South Africa. So what I'm saying is that, we've got to be very careful, because the more important you become, the more powerful you become, the more wealthy you become, you sometimes live in a world of your own. And you create your own realities. And you don't acknowledge and identify that in any democracy, and we have to stand for democracy. And let me just start by saying, I mean, the Minister of Energy is, if I can humbly say so, he's not just a hard-working person, but I think he's a great, great, great individual with integrity. But again, it comes from me, and I'm prejudiced, and so just take it with a pinch of salt. And of course, I'll say the same of others whose names I may not mention. But the bottom line for us is we have to take cognizance that in relation to where we are, and of course the facts speak for themselves, we didn't acquire a single, not one of the projects that we're involved in we got from government. We got them from the private sector in a bidding process. And you know what happened? We had to pay more than the other people who were bidding with us. And one of the advantages was we committed almost 400 million of our own money, not borrowed money, our own money, that we had to make available from various other sources. And on top of that, of course, we had to borrow because we have to prepare for the long term. So I just want to conclude by saying that, from our side, we have a duty and an obligation to all the people in this country. We are where we are. And I think the press statement speaks for itself. At some stage, we looked at even, because it's perception. And perception is more important in many instances than fact. Because the fact is, we've got very old conservative people who work with us and who are there specifically to make sure at all times that we comply with the law and ethics. So that is not the issue. Let me give you another better example. Assuming that I'm part of another company that goes, forget about the private sector, because in the private sector, that's where we've been. We have consciously avoided doing business with government. We don't like doing business with government. Eskom is a monopoly, so we've got no choice but to engage there. But if you look at every single one of our businesses from the very beginning, over the last 20, 25, 30 years, we consciously avoided government because it has its own complications. When you build a future, build it on competitiveness, employ the smartest and the brightest, pay them better than competition, compete. And sometimes you may not succeed, as you see in some of the opportunities where we've tendered. We did not succeed. And usually because a seller doesn't care whether you are green or yellow or whatever. They want the highest money because they are leaving. And we didn't pay as much as the others. So, we will engage, and we are focusing more on Africa. And the other thing we do have to say is, when I had a meeting with the leadership of the workers, one of the leaders pulled me aside and said, Comrade Patrice, many years ago, we had a meeting where there were discussions of policy. And you came out very strongly against privatization. And for us it was weird because we thought, now here's a business person who's anti-privatization. And it's important that you understand the context. The issue for me was you do need institutions like Eskom. We can't do it in the private sector. We cannot do it. Our main concern is profitability. It has to be. Our main concern is how do we make more money for our shareholders. You need institutions like Eskom who will have a developmental role to play and who will have roles to play, like, for example, making sure that there's affordable electricity for the poor and the unemployed and the marginalized. That is not the focus of business. We are in business. We know what we're talking about. So you do need an Eskom, a Transnet, to play that role that is going to focus on how do we make sure that there's electricity that's affordable, that is cheap, that is reliable, that the poor can pay for. It's in our interest. It's in the interest of the wealthy and rich people, because you live with the poor people. These poor people will, you will give rise to a revolution. We're already losing the confidence and trust of many of our people, because they look and say, yeah, but people who are connected, and so we've got to deal with those issues. Anyway, so we'll open it up for questions, and I do want to conclude by saying that, we've been talking to various constituencies, and I've got a comrade who I like, who said, Patrice, I'm watching you. I'm worried that he doesn't mention my name as much as he used to, so I'm worried he doesn't seem to be watching me as much as he did, as much as he should. But forget about the politicians. The politicians are doing what all politicians are supposed to do. It is elections. And they're supposed to dig and grow and try and get connections, whether the connections work or not. But if you can just consistently create a perception that there's corruption. And one of the leaders said to me in a moment of, he says, we know you, but you are the ham in the sandwich. And you are such a convenient ham because the facts speak for themselves. Don't worry, just keep quiet until after the elections, and we'll engage with you after the elections. But it's a democracy. So all of the political parties and everybody have to keep on identifying, criticizing, attacking, and make whatever conclusions they can. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But we will engage with everybody, because at the end of the day, for us, it's not about the elections. It's not even about what happens a year from now. It's our ability to look at, because that is our key constituencies, the ordinary South Africans. And you don't want people to look at you and say, but you see, there are no lights, because some of the allegations are, I can't even respond to them. They're excessively ridiculous. And and I have to ignore these things, excessively ridiculous, that, and absolutely without substance, that we are involved somehow in the blackout, and we've got people in the mines who have to go underground every day. If there are blackouts, we are in trouble. And we are bankrupting Eskom and all sorts of things. So it doesn't matter whether it's a truth or not. But we have a duty to look at ordinary South Africans and say, of course, you have to make up your mind. And everybody, including the political parties and various others, have to say, and it's correct, what they deem appropriate and attack and criticize. We just feel that we are under duty to put the facts and to tell the truth. Whether people believe or don't believe, we have to leave that up to them. And we've got to take into account, as I said, the key issue for us is, how do ordinary South Africans perceive us? And we do want to be perceived as business leaders and as a company, as well as a family, who recognizes that we are what we are because of the sacrifices of millions of South Africans, and have a huge, huge duty. Not in terms of what we say, because the things that we say mean absolutely nothing. It's more what we do. All right, so we'll take questions and we'll be available. And as I said, some of the questions Brian will answer later, but the main aim is just to present and to put forward the issues in terms of how we see them and our understanding of the truth, and and take it from there. If you ask a question, just say what is your name and which. And once more, thank you so much for being here, and also, there has to be zero tolerance of corruption, and it's not just whether there's corruption or not, but there has to be zero tolerance of the perceptions of corruption, which more often than not is actually more important than the facts. But we should also be careful that we don't create a perception, particularly in the black community, that somehow if you are successful and you succeed, that's there's something irregular. The last thing I want to say, my father was one of the few black businessmen who had a Jaguar. We had, I grew up in a family of very successful businesses. When I was 10 years old, we went to a boarding school. I spent 10 years in a mission school, a Catholic mission boarding school in Elwell North. So when we drove, my father was taking us to school. We were stopped. I was 10 years old. And I tell you, the police came, surrounded the car and said, there's a problem here. A black man driving a Jaguar. This is 1973. A black man driving a Jaguar? No. It was a big issue. And that's why many of the people who come from Pretoria, they say, you see, and correctly so, we are what we are, and I am what I am because of, we grew up in family businesses where entrepreneurs stood behind the counter when we were very young. But it was the issue. And thank God they found the commander at the De Wild police station. De Wild police station. And the commander said, no, please. But we were there for 3 hours. I said, no. We know this black man. And he said words I can't mention here, which relates to, he's a very wealthy, successful, it's okay. So we've got to be careful that we don't create the perception. And I'm saying this cautiously because we come from a period where we have, where we have really, really behaved contrary to everything this democracy could ever and should ever have stood for. If you listen to what comes out of the Zondo Commission. But there are lots of good, honest, ethical people, and I'm confident that we'll, based on our behavior and conduct over an extended period, all of us in the business sector and elsewhere, that there's more focus on what is proper. We've got too much to lose. We've got too much to lose from not ensuring that that there's compliance and ethics. Sorry, your name. Can we move around the mic, please? Thank you. Thank you very much.
Good morning. My name is Chris Yelland from EE Publishers. Three quick questions, if I may.
Evans, ne?
Yelland, Y-E-L-L-A-N-D. Yelland.
Okay, thank you.
To Mr. Damas, recently you stepped down from the presidential task team amidst perceptions of conflict of interest. It seems to be a small conflict compared to the perceptions around Arab. How are you going to deal with these perceptions? Secondly, if I may ask you, perhaps to Mr. Motsepe, you said you're not going to buy any of Eskom's assets. Does that include the Eskom Finance Company that has been reported that you were interested in acquiring? And then thirdly, if I may, also to Mr. Damas, you have in your press release indicated your desire for, or your goal towards clean energy and renewable energy that complies with the Paris Climate Accord. Does this rule out your involvement in any new coal projects? Because there have been some suggestions that with the banks, Standard Bank, Nedbank, and what is the other one? Standard Bank, Nedbank.
First Rand.
And First Rand pulling out of Thabameti and Kanyisa funding that your group...
funding coal. They've pulled out
funding of new coal, Thabameti, Kanyisa, IPPs. Can you therefore clarify that you are also not going to get involved in such projects which are dirtier than some of the worst of Eskom's power stations, and that you will comply with your commitments to the Paris Climate Change Accord? Thank you.
Very important. As we move on, I just must emphasize, we have a huge duty, personally, in the companies I'm associated to, the workers of this country. Critically important. And what is more important again is there's a huge amount of suspicion is what we do over the years. And that's why, and we are involved in coal. We are a partner in Glencore, in coal, in African Rainbow Minerals. There's about 5,000 workers there in those mines. We have a duty to those workers. They've got families. We have a duty to them. We've got a duty to every single one of the workers who may be affected by renewables. As we say in the statement, you've got huge unemployment. We can't, in this culture of the problems of unemployment, retrench and let more people lose their jobs. And I must be careful because there's the fourth industrial revolution and there are new jobs that comes with renewable energy. It is a fact. But I think what is required is an honest and a sincere discussion with NUMSA, with NUM, with COSATU, with AMCU and others to make sure that, as we say in the statement, not a single worker loses their jobs either because of renewable energy or IPPs. We've got to provide skills, redeploy people, or in fact, even outside IPPs, that people don't lose their jobs because of the fourth industrial revolution. We'll deal with the other issues as we move forward, and he'll answer them. Can we take more questions so that we take 5 and answer all of them?
Good morning. My name is Kabelo Khumalo from Business Report. I just have one question for Mr. Damas. In your statement, you refer to the conversation that you had with Mr. Motsepe, whereby you acknowledged that you had a major and serious perception problems. And my question, therefore, is when you got the call from the presidency inviting you to be part of the special tax team into Eskom, didn't you think of this when you initially accepted that invitation?
Good question. He didn't say that. I said that to him. Very good question. Okay, next question.
Thank you. My name is Pelane Pakhadi. I'm from News 24. Just a quick one, Mr. Motsepe. Just to...
You wrote down all of those. He will deal with the difficult ones and I will... Okay.
So, do you view perhaps the company's involvement with the contracts on the IPP as a conflict of interest?
Good question. Okay. Yeah.
Olani Mbanjwa from Power FM.
Just my apologies. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Motsepe, these allegations have been around since, I would say, July last year,
Yeah.
Especially since your brother-in-law, Minister Khadebe, actually
The last
signed...
time I checked, he was your brother-in-law.
He signed those IPPs after a 2-year delay. Why now? Why have you decided to come out now to actually clear the air? And I mean, don't you see, or do you not see that it is a conflict of interest, particularly when I just raise one event where the President Cyril Ramaphosa went to the Middle East to raise funding, and he did receive money there. And I remember that it was reported that Mr. Motsepe and Mr. Dames were there. Didn't you see there would be perceptions of conflict of interest then?
Good question. Let's just answer these issues very quickly. Let me start with your questions. We have no doubt in our minds that in relation to a lot of the energy issues, power issues, we can you give them seats there, please? There are people who've just entered there, chairs and documents as well. Okay, that there will be areas where we can add value, but we've taken a decision of principle. And the decision of principle is, in the minds of the workers, there's a huge amount of fear and insecurity and uncertainty relating to Eskom. We don't need to be involved there. We don't need to be involved. There are other areas where we will compete and will do well, including these IPPs. We've had to ask ourselves, is this an area where we should continue to be engaged in? We don't need. We've got other globally competitive companies and opportunities on the continent in renewables that we are looking at. So you spoke about the Eskom Financial Services. We don't want to, and it's got nothing to do with REP. It has to do, in the social media, they were saying that another company that we associated has been looking at. It's false. It's not true. It's absolutely false. The second issue, Saudi. Now, Saudi is, if we are to respond every day to what is in the public domain and what the accusations and the allegations, I will have to have a press conference every day. Let me tell you what the facts are. I've been part of the JP Morgan Advisory Council, which is a global council which involves people like Henry Kissinger, Lee Kuan Yew was part of that, Kofi Annan, and I had the honor to be part of that for many years. The Saudi Minister of Oil was on that advisory council. We've known each other for many years. And when I was arguing, and there's something called the IBC is the CEOs of the 100 largest companies in the world, of the World Economic Forum. I've had the honor of being part of that. And he has been part of that. So when the Saudi thing arose, literally 3 days before, I thought, we have to go and support South Africa, just like I've done over the last 20 years. Mandela used to have trade missions, I'd be there to support. Mbeki had trade missions, I would be there to support. So we went to Saudi in the main to give support to South Africa. It's very, very important. Now, is it a perception of conflict? Let me repeat. The issue is not, is there a conflict or not? The important issue is a perception. And I cannot agree more with you. We are not going to proceed on the basis that in people's minds, and the question that you asked here, Chief, relating to the IPPs and everything that we had acquired in the IPPs were acquired if you look at the program. But, you know, for as long as you've got a relative there who's the minister, there will be these issues. And you guys have to help us, because how do we deal with these issues? Short of saying that we should pull out of the business. And we are talking to various other stakeholders. We've had meetings with the workers. We're engaging with various other political parties. And the aim is for them to scream and shout and tell what they want in this private meeting, and to get ideas from them. You know, we have a commitment to build these power stations, which are going to create how many jobs, Brian? The ones that we're engaged in.
Oh, the ones that we engage
Yeah.
in. It's close to 400 jobs.
Yeah. So there are 400 jobs, and we've got these legal obligations. If you ask me, if before we entered into the IPPs and we knew what the things were in terms of the relatives, would we have gotten in? I've got no doubt we wouldn't have. Because I now have, you know, we've got to spend a huge chunk of our time explaining. And we have to keep our eye on what is important for the growth of our businesses, rather than how we explain. Just hold on, there's another question that was asked. Okay, whilst I'm looking, I think answer some of the questions that were raised.
Let me deal with the question from Chris and the question around the task team that was asked. I was asked, and I certainly, as a proud South African, want to help. We all have to help. We all have to step in and help, and that's what we've been asked to do. On reflection, and this is deep reflection about the ethics and the issue of perception that we've been talking about. You know, it's better to keep ourselves at the highest level of standards of ethics, and rather to ask to be released, and that's what I did. I think that was very important.
But it was not just a Brian issue, because Brian is employed by AREP. It was an AREP issue. And I think what he says is absolutely correct in terms of his thinking, you know, but it was correct. We also said, I also said, we shouldn't be there. And if you ask me, I think he's got a unique value to add, absolutely unique, one of the most experienced. But let me say this, South Africa will do well without me and Brian. They don't need us. We don't have to be. There are some more capable, I mean, in Brian's instance, even a little less, but in my case, totally more capable people, you know, and that's why on the task force team, I'm actually happy, because if you heard what was said recently, that there's an Italian company that we've got a relationship. We don't even know these guys. We've never dealt with them. And they are talking to us to unbundle. I mean, you know, and you were saying, why am I talking, who's the gentleman there? Why are we responding now? Because at the time, you know, when these things arose, we took extensive advice from our lawyers, and the issue was, there's nothing to it. There's absolutely nothing to it. Nothing in terms of legality, nothing in terms of ethics. And we're doing it now because I think, as I said, the issue for us is the noise just becomes, the misrepresentation and the lies and just becomes louder and louder. So it won't subside. And our intention is not to stop the lies and the misrepresentation, but to lay forward the facts in terms of how we see them. Sorry, Brian.
I think the only question that we need to respond to is Chris. Chris, we're currently not involved in the coal IPP program.
Yeah, but just on the coal, as I said, we have a duty. We are part of this clean energy, and it is the future. There'll be more jobs created in clean energy, but we've got to work on the transition and make sure that those workers who are currently involved in the coal mine industry get skills and and you can't bring the coal mining, and should not bring the coal mining industry to an end in the short term. Can't and should not. But there should be transitional measures in place, because quite a part of the commitments we have under the Paris Climate Talk agreements, we believe we have a duty to the environment, and we believe in clean energy. Sorry, any other questions? question at the back.
Good morning, Patrice and Mr. Brian Dames. My name is Patrice Motsepe. I come from an organization called South African Energy Forum. I will not go into the conflict of the business people having close proximity to the politician, but it's something that troubles all of us, not just about you. But I'm afraid that I want to convey this message, and first of all, I want to thank you for clarity. I think it's crystal clear, and it's in writing, and a lot of people will see it. We've been very worried about your involvement, particularly you having close proximity to our political principles. But the issue for us is that, unfortunately, you have invested in the IPP space, and I can see that you are new into it. I want to convey 3 messages which you may decide to answer to them, but it's just a comment and informing the people that the IPPs in the past have cut corners, and they continue cutting corners in terms of getting their power to their intended customers. They did cut the corners through the Department of Energy since 2011, and they continue cutting the corners, and they're not honest about the true cost of IPPs. There's a lot of hidden cost there. And in doing so, they are very, very demanding. So in summarizing, in that process of demanding, they have this thing that is called power purchase agreement, which we think our politicians may have had good intentions to supplement the power that Eskom could not guarantee. But it came in the form of power purchase agreement, which we now know that those power purchase agreements, they disadvantage Eskom. So as we speak today, the story of unbundling is the pressure from the IPPs, once again to cut the corners, to say, Eskom, you're the only one who's got the grid and the distribution to get our power to the customers. You have to give us an opportunity and a space to get that power there. And it's demanding. And here you are, my brother, having conducted your businesses very well, but unfortunately you are now invested into this bully that is imposing itself to Eskom to say, you got to get our power to the consumers. Here's the story of the IPPs quickly. We say it's their democratic right to be supported by Department of Energy. It's their democratic right to be supported by National Treasury. But they have no business to impose themselves on Eskom, either through unbundling or whatever demands that they make. They must produce their power wherever they produce, and they must go and get the customer wherever they can get, but they have no right to impose themselves on Eskom. And currently, the story about unbundling, the owners of the unbundling of Eskom is the IPPs, to give them an opportunity to hop onto the grid and get their power to the customers, and leaving Eskom generation to contend with financial problems where they will not even be financed. That is the danger, Mr. Patrice. I think going forward we'll engage with you to see how can we sort this out on behalf of the South Africans, to say whatever decisions we make about Eskom, they must not be imposed by the private guys called IPPs. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I just want, we've got the president of BBC and the vice president, and I want to thank you for what you've said, and we will engage on our side. We will, let's set the record straight. We've never been part, this is a 20-year, 30-year view. Those who were involved in Shell House, I'm talking about early 90s, will know that at that stage, some of us were strongly against, and we are entrepreneurs. We know the value of technology and the partnerships with the private sector. That's why it is in the document that Eskom, in order for Eskom to provide affordable, competitive electricity, has to use fourth industrial revolution technology. Otherwise, electricity is going to be expensive for the ordinary person, for poor people. And of course, as an industry, in the businesses that we are involved in the mining industry, we employ in excess of 60,000 workers in South Africa, in the companies where we are the major shareholder. We have a duty to every single one of those workers. And the cost we pay to Eskom for electricity is excessive by global standards. So you will never find us, because we don't believe in that. You will never find us to be arguing for privatization or for the sale of any of the assets of Eskom. You know, and as I said, you must see where we come from. We will strongly argue that Eskom should help us, because we can't, the private sector and government alone cannot deal with the problems of the poor, with the problems of unemployment, with the problems of marginalization. We do need an Eskom, a Transnet, and various others to play a developmental role. And that's why I'm saying, understand, I fully appreciate the role of technology and partnerships with the private sector that Eskom should do. I think, just two things I should tell you. I have a history with electricity in this country that extends for 30 years. I haven't just entered this industry. I used to, when I was a lawyer, I used to act for Eskom and had extensive exposure to Eskom. And there are issues at the time in the early 90s where we had to assist. And some of those issues we cannot discuss, because those are issues that were trying to make sure that all stakeholders were properly engaged. The second thing is, I was on the first electricity regulator. And again, even there I was asked to play a role. This is 1995, when the first body that controls Eskom was appointed. I was asked to serve with one objective. And the objective was to make sure that, because what we saw was Eskom was very profitable, well run, but didn't provide electricity to the poor. Didn't provide electricity in the rural areas. Didn't provide electricity in the homelands. I mean, I grew up in one of the areas where every time there was lightning, the lights would go off. So when I was asked to serve power on the first, this is 1995, on the first national electricity regulator, I was put there with the objective to say, focus on making sure that Eskom provides affordable electricity to the poor. And in the black rural areas had no. So we've got this whole history with Eskom. We are not just entering. African Rainbow Energy and Power was established in 2012, not in 2017. It's been there since 2012. And before that, we were involved for many, many years with shale gas. For many years, to look at opportunities for shale gas in sub-Saharan Africa. It didn't work. Anyway, is there something that...
No, I think we've covered.
Okay. Yes, Chief.
Good morning.
My apologies. I saw that... I saw your hand first. My apologies. I'll come to you now. Oh, sorry. You both have the mic. I was going to give the one with the mic. Okay.
Terence Creamer, Engineering News. Just on clarifying Arab's future strategy, you're involved with some bid window 4 projects, which is clear you don't want to drop the ball on those. You've acquired some projects in renewable energy space. What are you going to do about bid window 5, the gas to power program? Are you going to be a participant, or are you going to restrict yourself to non-South African?
Very good question. I mean, right now, I think as a principle, we will not, for as long as you've got the minister there, and I mean, we come from a country where people have been expressing views as to who should be in cabinet or not, and I'm so I'm so far removed. As I said to Brian, hey man, couldn't they? I mean, there are so many other people they could have made minister. But anyway, that is what it is now. We are where we are because really that was. And as I said, if you look at Jeff's background, excellent, works very hard. But I can tell you, for us as Arab, it's bad for business. Jeff has done excellent for, in my view, humble opinion, for the industry, for the country. And as I said, you should take that, with a sort of bias. But for Arab, and it's not about us. It cannot be about us. It has to be about South Africa. Our interest is really insignificant in the context. So it's a very good question. I mean, where we stand now, really, it is highly, the position is, the perceived conflict is a fundamental problem. Fundamental problem. And I repeat, those assets were acquired before. I mean, we concluded our agreements with all of these companies way before the minister was appointed. What was the question?
The question relates to our strategy for the future rounds that would come. We have not made any current commitments, but certainly it's something that we would engage with our partners. For us, the market is on the continent, and also some of the private sector opportunities in terms of self-provision of power supply.
And just to abuse the platform slightly, Mr. Dams, you were involved in Medupi and Kusile when they were Project Alpha, Delta, Charlie, etc. Are you surprised by the current narrative that these projects were designed so badly, were built so badly, procured so badly, considering that you had Eskom Enterprises at the time when that procurement started? Were you surprised at the figure of 24 billion for Medupi that was put in by the Public Enterprises Minister rather than the 70 billion you initially spoke about? So we're talking about now projects that are 4 times over budget. Could you just reflect on Medupi and Kusile, given your privileged position in those projects?
Yeah. Can I ask that he deals with it privately?
Let me deal with that,
Yeah.
Yeah.
With yourself and deal with it, because it's a very important question, but I don't want to keep the focus away from these conflicts and perceived conflicts. I think that's the key issue for us today. And he'll privately deal with that. Yes.
Yes. My name is Linda Mchuza.
I am from...
I'm from BID, which is BID Beyond Infadev.
It's a private company?
Yes.
Okay. I just want to say, my brother from the South African Energy Forum said that he spoke about the grid, meaning G-R-I-D, not G-R-E-E-D. Because when you said Eskom has the grid, I said, careful now. It's not that grid.
The grid.
That grid.
Yeah.
It's the other one. Yes.
Yes.
Yes,
My concern is that Eskom spends
in the world. We are the only African company that were invited to be there. And we actually got there because our main concern is technology in relation to the poor. That's the key issue. We see the incredible advances in Silicon Valley, and it is East Africa, not South Africa, East Africa. Kenya, and to some extent Kigali, Rwanda, where some of the most advanced technological developments in the world are tested. They should be tested in South Africa. So, I mean, we hear this, if you heard what Barack Obama said when he was here, and that's why I'm keen with what my brother from the energy said. There's so much misrepresentation, and some it is absolutely intentional misrepresentation. But with respect, some it's just ignorance, because you quote somebody who said something that is factually incorrect. So, as a country, we have to look at where is the country going 5, 10, 15 years from now. And I can't agree more with you. Eskom should under no circumstances, I can't talk for Eskom, but Eskom should under no circumstances be engaged in activities that are unprofitable. But what do? We get involved in activities where we invest, and there's a clear understanding that in the short term, they will be unprofitable. But there's an equally clear expectation that there will be, the losses in the beginning will be surpassed by the profits we can make in future. So I would just say that, we benefit from the discussions, but I tell you, it is the statements and the allegations, many of them have got absolutely no connection with what is sustainable, with what is profitable, with what the costs are. And that's why I'm very excited with, as I said, my brother. We've got to talk and look at the facts and science. Do you want to comment on that?
No, I think you're correct in terms of where the future is at and where the country has to start to introduce this. So the cost has come down significantly. I think, that is very important, that we actually have both Eskom and the private sector contributing, both the renewables as well. And the issue that we all have to deal with in the country is the economic growth. We need to get growth up.
Very important.
We need to get growth out so that we can use all our capacity and invest in more capacity. Around how all of this works, I think the regulator deals with the application both from Eskom side and what they have to allow for the payment to the IPPs.
Just one final issue. You will let me start by emphasizing the need for creating jobs and the duty we have to every single worker in the coal industry and in the mining industry. We should not just advance and enhance their jobs, but we've got to create new jobs. But you'll find yourself in this weird situation, and this is very important, where 10, 15 years from now, in Africa, they produce electricity at a significantly lower cost than South Africa, because they have used technology, they are using renewables. The biggest mistake is, we have to engage with the workers. We have to engage with the leadership of the workers. And we have to try and succeed in persuading them. Because I can tell you, the fear and the suspicion, I fully understand. And we've got to engage and say, but, we are going to have a serious problem. We have to create electricity long-term, and we've got to give an assurance and a comfort that there will not only be zero job losses, but that there will be new jobs that are created. Yes?
Angelo Coppola from China Global Television.
China Global.
In your statement, Mr. Motsepe, you talk about introducing additional governance and ethical rules. Can you flesh that out a bit? What exactly have you done there to obviate the perceptions of...
Very good question. And those are, we ask our lawyers, and I will share a secret with the gentleman from Power. A few weeks after the announcement of the minister, a few days, we ran to our lawyers and said, guys, what do we do here? And part of that involved going to Parliament, because you don't want to respond down the line. We know this. You want to be extremely proactive. And there were all sorts of engagements and issues because, we immediately saw that we've got an issue here. And we've got to try and deal with it proactively. Now, what have we done? We've done what we can. But are they enough? I don't think so. Because they're all in terms of what the lawyers say you can do legally. Inside the company, the ethics committee, those set up because strengthened the social and ethics committee, brought on more independent directors as well as legality in the company to look more specifically at the IPP projects that we're involved in, and also engage with our partners. It's very, very important. But so what? These are all internal issues. The key issues is what do you do outside? And what we've done outside is what I've told you, engage with various stakeholders, and it's an ongoing process. But it's one of those issues where, as I said, you're in a football game, and it's an ongoing matter. And it starts with us acknowledging it and say, we've got an issue here. We have a serious issue here. Are we going to ask closure now? My president. There's it.
Thank you, Patrice. I could not miss an opportunity to just say a word from the Black Business Council, and making sure that we don't move away from the core theme of what we're invited here for. As a Black Business Council, it's very important that we put on record how proud we are of your involvement in the economy, and how proud we are of your role in alleviating the plight of the poor through many initiatives. And we are particularly impressed at your endeavors to be transparent about Arab involvement in this space. It will have been very helpful, we must add, if the government will have been a lot more forthright when the question was put, who are involved in the IEP programs, in the renewable programs, because it creates a cloud of suspicion which is entirely unnecessary. The extent to which we have gone into detail to explain the genesis of your involvement in this program attests to the ethics which defines your involvement in business, which we can, with hand in heart, say we can attest to it, and we are very proud of. But from our point of view as the Black Business Council, we support you.
Thank you.
And we wish you luck and success in your endeavors.
Thank you.
We'll be having a summit as Black Business Council next week on Thursday and Friday. We will possibly put forward our views on a comprehensive set of things, and we'll definitely not want to abuse your platform to say what we stand for.
Thank you so much. We are so grateful. And I just want to add that, we've got these agreements and there's confidentiality in those agreements. But anything that relates, everything we do is in the public domain. And we have a duty to, not just to disclose and to be transparent, but also to answer whatever questions you may have. And some of it, you may not be happy with our answer, but I think, the issue for us is just to try as best we can to be as truthful and as transparent as we can. I'm not worried about the short term. I'm more worried about the need for us to be, over the extended period going to the future, to be seen to have engaged and to have been as not forget about the law. All of us have to comply with the law, and also to be ethical. We comply with that as well, but more to the issues of perception, because we should not fool ourselves. There is an issue, and I don't know. We've got to work our way out of those issues. I saw two more questions towards closure. Can we ask the lady here? And then...
Sorry, Mr. Motsepe, Mr. Thomas, Linley from the Mail and Guardian.
Mail and Guardian.
You might have mentioned this, but please just repeat yourself and bear with me. So does this mean you are going to, given these problems of perception, are you going to exit the contracts that you're currently in? And Mr. Kramer asked about the bid window 5 contracts. Does that mean, again, to deal with perception, you will be exiting whatever bids you're currently involved in? I just want clarity on those things.
Very good question. We've got legal obligations, and when these agreements were concluded, the current position was not anticipated. We have to comply. We cannot set a track record of having concluded contracts and having undertaken legal obligations, and we either breach or exit. So we will comply with all of the obligations that we have. The current situation in South Africa is a matter of grave concern to not just to us, but to everybody else, and it's an issue that we've got to monitor and look at on an ongoing basis. And the focus for us is indeed what we said from the very beginning was going to be South Africa and the continent, but we are making progress on the continent. Question.
So Alex Winning from Reuters. My question is exactly about that. Could you give us a sense of the scale? You put here your total equity value of your projects in renewable energy in South Africa here as part of the RE-IPP program. Could you give us a sense of the total equity value of your projects in energy and power in Africa as a continent,
yeah.
and also, which other countries are you involved in, and which are some of your flagship projects, ones that you're particularly proud of?
Very good question. Again, the company was formed in 2012, okay, and one of the companies that is related to us, African Rainbow Capital Holding, has a renewable energy fund which is Africa focused, which has $100 million, and that is Africa focused, not South Africa. And because you see, that is a fund, energy lies at the heart of development, economic growth. I was out of the country a week or so ago, and they were talking about when you've got electricity, all of a sudden, all of the farm produce doesn't have to rot, can now be put in refrigerators and you can sell them. And the same applies about what your refrigerators domestically look like. So Brian has done excellent work in terms of the engagement on the continent. We don't have a signed, from an Arab perspective, there isn't a concluded transaction in Africa, but there's some really interesting and exciting discussions ongoing. I saw a question there, a hand.
And also just to clarify, the 800 million that was referred to here, is that your total investments only in the ReIPP program?
Yeah.
Or are there other areas not in the ReIPP program?
Yeah. Well, yeah, we're talking about Arab now.
Yeah.
Because Arab is our main South Africa, at this stage is our main renewable energy and power vehicle. And if you look at the document, it says that we have put in close to 400 million, 360 or whatever, of our own resources, and the equity value, Brian?
So you're correct. We are busy with other transactions. We've not concluded them yet, and then that will obviously increase.
Okay, but let me tell you what's happening. You look at the numbers, because people, an amount of close to, you see, I've got a small one, there's a big one. Is that my big one?
It's mine.
Okay. Your eyes are better than mine. You can look at this one. It's a copy of that one. Have you got a copy of the big one?
No.
So an amount of close to $50 billion was spent. I mean, 50 billion. And there's some good things that has happened. And this is over the last 5 years.
5 years?
Yeah, maybe 5 years. A huge amount of that was foreign companies.
Yeah.
And they bring technology we don't have in South Africa. And it's good for South Africa. Absolutely good. When you go and start a solar project in the Kalahari, there's nothing there. There's nothing. And all of a sudden you create jobs, there's infrastructure, there's technology. It changes the lives of thousands and thousands of people. And I can tell you, no country in the world can and should dare not to be involved in the fourth industrial revolution. And for us in Africa, it's worse. We currently have 226 million people who are between the age of 15 and 24. By 2030, we will have close to 340, 350 million young people or youth between the age of 15 and 24. If we don't provide jobs for those young people, we're going to have untold problems. We're experiencing it already in South Africa. Young black girls and boys, particularly, go to university, have a degree, have no work. And we want our children to grow up in this country. We want to retire in this country. You will have problems. You will have serious hovering on strife, and as well as it's not just about delivery disruptions. You will have the serious civil problems in South Africa. So whilst we are ahead of the process, we've got to use technology, because technology can create hundreds of thousands. New technology. So is this the end now? Okay, let me just repeat by saying we will remain, for those who may have one-on-one questions, and I do want to conclude by saying we will also engage with all of the political parties, all of them, that and talk about various, and all means all, talk about various issues, including this, and hear what their thinking is, and because at the end of the day, we are all South Africans and have a duty to this country and our people. You want to say something as we close?
No.
Nothing. Okay. Thank you so much, and we're most honored that you are. And let me just conclude by saying, President, thank you so much, and Vice President, we are so honored by your presence, and thanks to everybody for being here. Thank you.